Good afternoon, everybody. It's the Insignificant Stoic here back at the football pitch. I bet you thought I was going to say park. This video follows the division of philosophy, cosmology, logic, logos, and ethics video in my History of Stoicism series. And today we're actually going to start getting involved with a little bit of the meat and bones of Zeno's tripartite division of Stoicism. Not completely, but we are going to talk about meat and bones. Before I do that, I'll just make a short summary of what we talked about in the last video and point something out to you. In the last video I said that a developed philosophy, a well thought out philosophy, because remember, philosophies are intellectual constructions. They are things that either an individual or individuals come up with, right, as to an explanation about life, the universe, and everything, right, to steal that from Douglas Adams. So, first thing a philosophy has to have is a cosmology, which is an explanation of stuff, stars, the moon, earth, grass, cats, dogs, human beings, all that stuff. Then it has to have a logic. So logic or logos is sort of like the operating system of the cosmos. It's what dictates how the system of the cosmos operates, right? It's the logic behind it. And lastly, a philosophy has to have an ethics if it's to be useful. So, we said before, people on the street were asking, how do I live rightly? What's the best way to live? What's the good life? And ethics answers that. And here's what I want to point out. Not only are those three things, cosmology, logic, and ethics, related and inform one another, logos becomes central. What does logos do? Well, if it informs the logic of or informs the system of the cosmos in its operation, it's also the same thing that would indicate to human beings how to behave, because human beings are part of that system, right? They're part of that cosmic system. We live in the cosmos. So logic becomes the thing that binds the cosmos and ethics. Very important principle. It will become the most important thing as philosophy goes on into the Roman period and later into the Christian period. Become very significant. And as a matter of fact, from one vantage point, amongst all these different competing philosophies, there's that question, what is the logos? Everybody has ideas of it. Even in Stoicism, you'll see as Stoicism changes over time, they never really settle on that idea of like, okay, well, what actually is the logos, right? But you'll see there's eventually a change where logos becomes an ontological thing, and we'll talk about that in the future. But for right now, I want you to keep in the back of your mind the significance of logos when you read it or you see it talked about. Anyway, to return to Diogenes Laertius's book 7, a summary of Stoic philosophy, Zeno's Citium. He says to us, or tells us, that the Stoics divided their philosophical doctrine into three parts. One part relates to physics, one to ethics, and one to logic. Physics, if you remember before in the last video, I mentioned very quickly that metaphysics is a part of cosmology, and it tends to, further clarify cosmology. So physics is related to that. So keep that in mind. It's related to the cosmology. So we have here that the Stoics, Diogenes Laertius tells us, has three parts to it. It already has the logic, the logos, that operating system, the ethics, how man should behave or how he should behave and live rightly within that system, and the physics, which relates to the cosmology. Diogenes goes on to say, and they compare philosophy, and this is very important because this will sort of echo what I said in my last video. Speaking of the Stoics, and they compare philosophy to an animal, likening logic to the bones and sinews, ethics to the fleshly parts, and physics to the soul. So here you have Stoics who are referring to their philosophy as a whole by its parts. What kind of a whole is it? I mean, W-H-O-L-E. It's an animal. Well, what's an animal? Well, what does an animal do? An animal eats, drinks, sleeps, defecates, multiplies, goes for walks, sleeps in bushes, whatever. It's a living creature. And so when they compare their philosophy and its components to a living creature, you can already see one version or one concept starting to bud forth here in a question. Is he saying, is Diogenes saying, that the Stoics say that the cosmos is a living creature? Maybe. You'll find echoes of that in lots of other places in the Stoic writers. What about, is it just a complete system? There's that too. You find that. It's not a living thing. It's just a system. You find that in other Stoics. Anyway, so we get this picture of these three parts, this cosmology, this logic or logos, and ethics, comprising a complete philosophy, a living being. Well, even if you don't say the cosmos is living, we are. Animals are. They live according to the logos, right? And so, in a sense, you kind of say that, you can understand them. The cosmos could be alive, even if it's not. At least a portion of it is. He goes on to say, and this is kind of significant here. So, well, all three parts are present that I mentioned before. It's a living thing. It's a whole structure. It's a whole thing that operates. And this is important. I said this a few times, just so you remember, because this comes in big time in Roman Stoicism. It is a system. Remember that too. It's a system. He says now about the Stoics, again, they compare philosophy to a city fortified by walls and regulated by reason, logic, logos. And then, as some of them say, no one part is preferred to another. So in other words, logic, physics, and ethics. He can mean here that you can't take one out, right? One is not more significant than the other, right? So one can't go missing. It needs all the parts. You can't put emphasis on one over the others. It takes all of these components to make the cosmos. Therefore, to make the philosophy. Take the bones and sinew out of a dog. What do you got left? It's a floppy thing. Is it going to be alive? No. Now he says, and so they teach them all in combination. So what he's saying is they're all of equal significance, and they are all taught together. So if you've ever seen or know anything about a classical school, and they teach the trivium, they teach the three disciplines at the same time. So you might have different classes of those with those subjects, but in the first year you'll get all three. In the second year you'll get all three, but in a little bit more advanced state. So that's their very classical way of teaching. You'll get all of the disciplines at the same time, so all the divisions are taught together, because theoretically none is more important than the other They're all together. It makes the whole. Here comes a but, though. But others class logic first. Others class the logos first. Physics second, and that's ethics third. So you can already see that within Stoicism, even though they teach them all together, they think none is more important than the other. Logos is kind of getting a preeminence, at least an emphasis. But who does that? Is that an evolution in Stoicism? But others class logic first, physics second, and ethics third, as does Zeno in his treatise Exposition of Doctrine. It says, he says, that Diogenes was the first to divide Stoicism into the three parts. He's the founder. They teach it all together, but Zeno placed logic first. Do you remember I said about the Logos, how it's going to rise in significance, become very important? That concept of what the Logos is, boy, it's going to go through hell in the future. For now, Zeno's not thinking that far ahead. He just knows it's kind of important. In the next video, we'll talk about logic. And we'll go through, I think in the next 3 videos, one for logic, one for physics, and one for ethics. So that's it for me today. Hey, have a good day and keep your hat on. It's windy out there.